Welcome back to Audible Archives. I'm Rob, your host, and tonight we uncover one of the most curious cases ever to cross the threshold of Baker Street. A mysterious advertisement, a league of red-headed men, and an opportunity too strange to be true. This is a red-headed lead, rewritten by Raul and narrated by Rob. A tale where deception hides behind laughter, and the simplest mystery masks the grandest design. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because in the world of Holmes and Watson, every clue hides a deeper truth. It was a mild autumn afternoon when I stopped by Baker Street and found Sherlock Holmes deep in conversation with a stout, red-faced gentleman whose fiery hair seemed to ignite the room. I apologized for interrupting and began to retreat, but Holmes swept me inside with sudden, almost eager tug, shutting the door behind me. "You could not have chosen a better moment, my dear Watson," he said warmly. "I feared I was intruding," I replied. "You are," he said. "Very much so. Then I'll wait in the other room." "Not all. This gentleman, Mr. Wilson, has assisted me, unwittingly perhaps, but quite usefully, in several cases, and I'm no doubt he will be equally valuable in this one." The portly visitor rose halfway in his chair, offering a brief, awkward bob of greeting. His small eyes, ringed in folds of flesh, flicked toward me with a look that was part welcome, part uncertainty. "Try the settee, Watson," Holmes said, settling into his armchair with fingertips steepled, a posture I knew meant he was in full analytical command. "I know your fondness of bizarre, the odd corners of life beyond the dull routines most people accept. You prove that by recording my cases with such enthusiasm, and, if I may say so, with a certain amount of literary flourish." "Your cases warrant it," I protested. Holmes gave a thin smile. "You recall, just before we investigated Miss Mary Sutherland's little mystery, I mentioned that the strangest, most improbable stories come directly from life, not imagination. And I disagreed. I said, 'You did indeed, and I shall continue piling fact upon fact until your reason surrenders and agrees with me.'" He leaned back. "Now, Mr. Jabez Wilson here has come to us with narrative so unusual, so singular, that even I cannot say yet whether we are dealing with a crime at all. But strange it most certainly is." Holmes turned to the man. "Mr. Wilson, would you kindly begin again? Not only as Dr. Watson missed your early remarks, but the uniqueness of your situation demands we take in every detail." Wilson puffed out his chest with something like pride and drew from his coat a crumpled newspaper. As he flattened it over his knee and studied the advertisement column, I took a moment to observe him closely in the Holmesian manner. There was little to glean. He appeared the very image of a middle-class British tradesman, plump, deliberate in his movements, radiating a mixture of pomposity and misfortune. His trousers were a loose gray shepherd's check. His frock coat was black, but not entirely clean. His waistcoat sagged under the weight of a brassy Albert watch chain. A square metal ornament dangled from it like a token from better days. A frayed top hat and a faded brown overcoat with a wrinkled velvet collar lay beside him. He was ordinary in every respect, except for that astonishing shock of blazing red hair and the unmistakable irritation etched across his face. Holmes caught my appraising glance and smiled faintly. "Beyond the obvious," he murmured, "that he has worked with his hands, take snuff, is a Freemason, has spent time in China, and has been doing a good deal of writing lately, I can tell you nothing more." Wilson bolted upright, fingers stabbing the newspaper but eyes fixed in amazement on Holmes. "How in the name of good fortune did you know all that, Mr. Holmes?" Wilson burst out, staring at him as though he performed a magic trick. "The manual laborer now, that's true enough. I started as a ship's carpenter." Holmes nodded. "Your hands tell that story. Your right hand is a good bit larger, stronger than the left. You've worked with it. The muscles are overdeveloped." "Well then, snuff? Freemasonry." Holmes smiled in that infuriatingly gentle way of his. "I won't insult you by explaining the obvious, especially since you're wearing an arcing compass breastpin, which is technically against your order's regulations. Wilson slapped his forehead. Ah, yes, I've forgotten. He frowned. But the writing, how did you know about that? What else would cause a right cuff to shine like glass for 5 inches? Holmes replied, and the left sleeve to be worn smooth where the elbow rests on a desk. Ink, pressure, friction, they give a man away as surely as fingerprints. Well, China then? How could you know that? Holmes gave a small, almost professorial nod. The tattoo above your right wrist, a fish with delicately pink-stained scales. That style is exclusively Chinese. I've studied their tattoo methods. He pointed subtly toward Wilson's watch chain. The Chinese coin confirms it. Wilson let out a heavy, rolling laugh. Well, I thought at first you'd done something clever, but I see it's all just simple enough. Holmes raised his brows toward me. You see, Watson, I err in explaining. Omni ignotum pro magnifico. The unknown is always glorious. If I'm too candid, my reputation will sink like a stone. Now, Mr. Wilson, have you found the advertisement? Yes, here it is, Wilson said, jabbing a thick red finger halfway down the column. This is what started everything. Read it for yourself. I took the crumpled paper. The ad was astonishing. To the red-headed lead on account bequest of the late Ezekiel Hopkins of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, USA, there is now another vacancy open, which entitles a member of the lead to a salary of £4 a week for purely nominal services. All red-headed men, sound in body and mind, and above the age of 21 years, are eligible. Apply in person on Monday at 11 o'clock to Duncan Ross. The office is a league, 7 Pope's Court, Fleet Street. I read it twice before managing coherent thought. What on earth does this mean? I exclaimed. Holmes chuckled, shifting in his chair like a man delighted beyond measure. It's certainly off the beaten path, isn't it? Now then, Mr. Wilson, start from the beginning. Tell us about yourself, your home, your shop, and precisely what effect has advertisement had upon your life. Watson, make a note of paper and date. The Morning Chronicle, April 27th, 1890. 2 months ago. Excellent. Holmes steepled his fingers again. Go on, Mr. Wilson. Wilson mopped his forehead, gathering himself. Well, as I've said, Mr. Holmes, I run a small pawnbroker's in Coburg Square near the city. Nothing grand. It used to do well enough that I kept 2 assistants. Now I can barely afford one, and only because he's willing to take half wages to learn the trade. Holmes leaned forward. The name of this obliging assistant? Vincent Spaulding, Wilson replied, though he's not exactly young. Hard to say his age. Smart fellow. Too smart. Could earn double elsewhere, I've no doubt. But if he's content, I've no wish to put ideas in his head. A fortunate employer you are, Holmes murmured. Underpaying a skilled worker is not commonly met with. Oh, he has his faults, Wilson admitted quickly. Photography mostly. Snaps pictures when he ought to be minding the shop, and always diving into the cellar like a rabbit to develop them. That's his worst habit. But he's honest and hard-working. And he still lives with you? Yes, sir. He and a girl 14 who cooks a little and keeps things tidy. That's my whole household. I'm a widower, no family. We live quietly, the 3 of us, and keep ourselves afloat. Nothing extravagant. The whole affair began with that advertisement, Wilson said, shifting his weight as though the memory itself tired him. Spaulding came down to the office exactly 8 weeks ago today, waving this very newspaper at me, he said. Wilson straightened up, mimicking his assistant's eager voice. I give my soul, Mr. Wilson, if I were a red-headed man. I asked him why, and he jabbed at the paper. Look here, another opening for the red-headed lead. Worth a small fortune, so they say. The trustees can't even find enough red-headed fellows to give the money to. If my hair would only turn color, I'd walk right into it. Wilson gave a helpless shake of the head. I stay home most days, Mr. Holmes. My shop comes to me. People walk in when they've something to pawn. I can go weeks without stepping off my own mat. So I'm always grateful when Spaulding brings in a bit of news from the outside world. Spaulding, he went on, looked at him with wide, excited eyes. "You've never heard of the League of the Red-Headed Men?" I told him I hadn't. "Well, you should. You're eligible and the pay's good." "How good?" I asked him. "200 a year, maybe more, and hardly any work to interfere with your business." "That," Wilson said emphatically, made my ears stand straight up. "Business hasn't been good for years. An extra couple hundred would have kept me afloat nicely." He leaned forward. I told him, "Then tell me everything." And he did. Spaulding explained that the League had been founded by an eccentric American millionaire, Ezekiah Hopkins, a red-headed man with an almost sentimental devotion to others of his color. In his will, Hopkins left a vast fortune to a group of trustees with strict instructions. Use the interest to create comfortable, easy jobs for flame-haired men over 21 living in London. That's what Spaulding said, Mr. Holmes. Easy money and very little work. But with so many red-headed men, I told him, how could anyone hope to get it? Not as many as you think, he said. It's only Londoners, only grown men, and only those with hair like gas flame. Light red won't do, dark red won't do, only blazing, fiery red. Now, if you wanted to apply, Mr. Wilson, you walk right in. But maybe it's not worth the trouble for a few £100. Wilson's face reddened slightly. Well, as you gentlemen can see, my hair is as rich a red as any could hope for, so I thought I stood a good chance. And Spaulding seemed to know so much about it that I asked him to put up the shutters for the day, so he could come along with me. He was only too glad for a holiday. Wilson paused, as if reliving it. We closed up shop and headed straight for the address in the advertisement. And I tell you, Mr. Holmes, I hope never see a sight like again. His eyes widened with the memory. From every corner of London, north, south, east, west, every man with a hint of red in his hair had descended upon Fleet Street. The place was jammed, choked, bursting with red-headed men. Polk's Court looked like someone had overturned a cart filled with oranges. Holmes smiled faintly at the image. All shades, Wilson continued. Straw, lemon, orange, brick, clay, liver, Irish setter, but not so many with a real flame color the League wanted. When I saw the crowd, I nearly turned back. But Spaulding, he wouldn't hear a word of retreat. To this day, I don't know how he did it, but he shoved and pulled and pushed like a man possessed. Before I knew it, he'd muscled me through mob and on to the steps of the building. There was a constant stream up and down those stairs, hopeful on the way up, crushed on the way down. But Spaulding wedged me like a cork in a bottle, and in a few minutes we'd been forced right into the office. Holmes leaned back, fingers steepled, a faint spark of amusement in his eyes. Your experience has been extremely entertaining, he said as Wilson paused for a breath and refreshed himself with a thunderous pinch of snuff. Please continue. Wilson nodded gratefully. Well, when Spaulding and I finally made it into that office, there wasn't much to see. A couple wooden chairs, a plain table, and behind it sat a small fellow with hair even redder than mine. If you can believe it, Holmes raised an eyebrow, impressed. This man, Wilson went on, spoke only a few words each candidate as he came up, then found some flaw, some defect, and sent them away. Getting a vacancy didn't look quite so easy after all. But when our turn came, things changed. The stout pawnbroker settled into the memory. As soon as we stepped inside, the little man shut the door. Seemed he wanted a private word. Spaulding introduced him briskly. This is Mr. Jabez Wilson, he said. He wishes to apply for vacancy. The little man's eyes lit up. Admirably suited, he declared. Every requirement satisfied. I cannot recall seeing such magnificent color. He stepped back, Wilson said, reddening, cocked his head like a bird sizing up a worm, and stared at my hair until I felt like a schoolboy on inspection. Then, without warning, the man lunged forward, seized Wilson's head in both hands, and gave a violent tug. I yelped loud enough to shake the rafters, Wilson admitted. He let go and said, Ah, tears. Good. Everything is genuine. Holmes let out a soft, appreciative laugh. He said they'd been tricked before, Wilson continued. 2 wigs. One fellow painted his hair with God knows what. And, well, the rest of his stories involve cobbler's wax and human deceit that would make you sick. Wilson shook his head in disbelief. Then he opened a window, shouted down that the vacancy was filled, and the whole street groaned like a disappointed theater audience. Within a minute, every redhead had vanished, except his and mine. The little man turned back. "My name is Duncan Ross," he said. "I'm one of the pensioners supported by our noble benefactor's will. Tell me, are you married, Mr. Wilson? Any children?" I told him no, Wilson said. He looked at me like I'd kicked a dog. "Unfortunate, very unfortunate," he said. "The fund was not only meant to support redheads, but to encourage, well, more of them. A bachelor is a sad disappointment." Wilson sighed. I thought that was the end of it. But after a moment's thought, he waved concern aside. "In another case it would be fatal," he said. "But that hair of yours deserves a little rule bending." Holmes smirked. "Well," Wilson continued, "he asked when I to begin. I told him it was awkward. I already had a business to run. But Spaulding jumped him before I could finish. 'Don't worry, Mr. Wilson. I can manage the shop for you.'" Holmes' eyes sharpened at the mention of Spaulding. "And what were the hours?" I asked. 10 to 2, Wilson replied. "Morning work. Perfect for me. My trade is busiest in the evenings." He spread his hands. I said it suited me well. Then I asked about the pay. £4 a week, said Ross. "And the work?" I asked him. "Purely nominal." So I asked what he meant by that. Wilson's voice lowered, mimicking the solemnity of Duncan Ross. "You must remain in the office or at least a building from 10 to 2. If you leave, even for a moment, you lose your position forever. The will is very clear. No excuses accepted. Not illness, not business, not death itself." "For hours a day," Wilson said, shrugging. I told him I'd stay put. "Good," said Ross. "Your work is to copy the Encyclopedia Britannica. There's volume 1 in that cabinet. Bring your own ink and pens. We provide table and chair. Will you be ready tomorrow?" "Certainly," I told him. Wilson continued, leaning forward in his chair as though reliving the moment. "I'll be here tomorrow." "Then allow me to congratulate you once more, Mr. Jabez Wilson," said Duncan Ross, bowing so deeply his flaming hair nearly grazed a table. "You are now the holder of a very important appointment." He ushered me out, Wilson said, and I walked home with Spaulding feeling as if I'd stumbled into some dream. £4 a week for copying out an encyclopedia? Who wouldn't be pleased? But the glow didn't last. By evening, he admitted, I talked myself into believing the whole thing was a fraud, some elaborate hoax. Who would pay a man to do such simple work? Who would even invent such a will? It defied all sense. Spaulding did what he could to reassure him. But by nightfall, Wilson had nearly talked himself out of the job entirely. "But in the morning," he said, "I figure it couldn't hurt to look. So I bought a penny bottle of ink, a quill pen, 7 sheets of foolscap, and marched to Pope's Court." He chuckled at the recollection. To my surprise, everything was exactly as promised. The table was ready. Duncan Ross was there, positively glowing with encouragement. He set me work on a letter A and then left, stopping occasionally to check that all was well. At 2 o'clock, Ross returned, complimented his progress, and locked the office door behind him. This went on every day, Wilson continued. Saturday came, and he walked in, dropped 4 sovereigns on the table, and wished me a pleasant weekend. Holmes smiled. Quite the arrangement. "The same thing next week and the week after," Wilson said. "I never left the building before 2. I didn't dare, and the position suited me perfectly. After a while, Ross hardly came in at all, but I kept working. A man doesn't risk losing such a post." He sighed. 8 weeks passed like that. I copied pages on abbots, archery, armor, architecture, Attica, filled nearly a shelf of my writing. It cost a bit in foolscap, but I was making steady progress. He paused, then delivered the blow, and then suddenly it ended. Holmes sat forward. "Ended?" "Yes, sir, this very morning. I arrived at 10, but the door was locked, and nailed to it this." Wilson pulled from his pocket a square of stiff white card. Holmes and I leaned in. "The Red-Headed League is dissolved." October 9, 1890. We stared at the message and then at Wilson's crestfallen expression, until the absurdity of it all overwhelmed us. Holmes and I burst into uncontained laughter. Wilson reddened, his face matching his hair. "I do not see the humor," he snapped. "If you intend to make sport of me, Mr. Holmes, I can take my case elsewhere." Holmes immediately waved him back into his chair. No, forgive me. I assure you, Mr. Wilson, this case is far too unusual for me to let slip. But you must admit, it is a touch amusing. Now tell me, what did you do after finding the notice?" I was stunned, didn't know what to think. I went to neighboring offices. None had ever heard of the lead. Finally, I asked the landlord downstairs. He's an accountant. Holmes nodded for him to continue. I asked him about the red-headed lead. He said he'd never heard of such an organization. So I asked about Duncan Ross. Wilson's voice tightened. "Never heard of him," the landlord said. "What about the gentleman in number 4? I asked him. "The red-headed man," he said. "Yes." "Oh, that was William Morris," he told me. "A solicitor. He was only using a room temporarily until his new office was ready. Moved out yesterday." Holmes steepled his fingers, eyes glittering. "And did he tell you where you might find this William Morris?" "Oh, yes," the landlord told me. "He gave me the address, 17 King Edward Street near St. Paul's." Wilson sighed deeply as he leaned back in his chair. "So off I went, Mr. Holmes. But when I reached the place," he shook his head, "it was nothing but a factory for artificial kneecaps, and not a soul there'd ever heard of William Morris or Duncan Ross." Holmes steepled his fingers. "And after that, I went home to Coburg Square," Wilson said. "Took my assistant's advice. But Spaulding was as lost as I was. Said I should wait and hope for a letter." He frowned. "But that wasn't good enough. Not when a man loses a £4-a-week position without explanation. That's why I came to you, sir. They said you help people in trouble." "And you did wisely," Holmes replied. "Your case is far more remarkable than the villains likely intended. In fact, I suspect there are deeper shadows in this affair than are visible at first glance." "Deep enough for me." Wilson huffed. "I've lost £4 a week." Holmes gave a soft laugh. "As far as you're concerned, Mr. Wilson, you have suffered no harm. In fact, if my arithmetic serves, you're £30 richer and have acquired a formidable knowledge of the letter A in the Encyclopedia Britannica." The man blinked. "Well, yes, sir, but I wish to know who they are, and why they did this. If it was a trick, it was a costly one. They paid me £32 for nothing, and we will uncover the reason, I assure you." Holmes leaned forward. "But first, some questions. Your assistant, the one who brought you the advertisement, how long had he been with you?" "About a month." "How did he come to you?" "Answered an advert." "The only applicant?" "No, there were 12. "Why did you choose him?" "He was clever, handy, and agreed to come cheap." "Half wages?" "Yes." Holmes nodded slowly, as though confirming a suspicion already formed. "What is he like, does Vincent Spaulding?" "Short, stout-built, quick in his movements. No beard or mustache, though he's not far off 30, and he's got a splash of acid on his forehead." Holmes sat up sharply, his eyes gleaming. "I thought so," he murmured. "Tell me, have you noticed his ear lobes? Are they pierced for earrings?" "Yes, sir. He said a gypsy did it when he was young." Holmes sank back into contemplation, his gaze darkening. "And he is still with you?" "Oh, yes. I've just left him." "And the shop?" "All in order. There's never much to do in the mornings." "That will be all, Mr. Wilson. I can give you an opinion by Monday. Today is Saturday, and I hope by then we shall have solved your mystery." Wilson stood, somewhat reassured. "Thank you, Mr. Holmes." When the door closed behind him, Holmes turned to me. "Well, Watson, your thoughts?" "I have none," I admitted. "It is utterly baffling." Holmes smiled slightly. "As a rule, the more bizarre a thing is, the simpler its explanation. It is the dull, ordinary crimes that truly trouble the mind. but I must act quickly. I raise an eyebrow. What will you do? Holmes reached for his pipe. Smoke. This is a three-pipe problem, Watson. Do not speak to me for 50 minutes. With that, he curled into his chair, knees tucked up, pipe angled beneath his hawk-like nose, eyes closed. He became a statue of concentration. After half an hour, he seemed to sleep. I myself began to nod, when he suddenly sprang upright, eyes blazing, every muscle alive with decision. "Sarah Say plays at St. James's Hall this afternoon," he announced. "Tell me, Watson, are your patients likely to survive without you?" "I have nothing pressing. My practice is rarely urgent." "Excellent. Grab your hat. We will lunch on the way. I must visit the city first." He grinned. "And the program is mostly German music. Introspective, thoughtful, just what I need." He swept toward the door. "Come along, Watson." The underground carried us as far as Aldersgate, its iron wheels screaming to the tunnels like something in pursuit. From there, Holmes led us on foot to morning crowds until we stepped into Coburg Square, the quiet little box that housed the strangest riddle we had heard in months. It was a neglected place, for rows of dingy brick houses huddled around a fenced patch of grass that looked long defeated by London soot. A few weary lower bushes clung to the edges of the enclosure, like soldiers who had given up expecting reinforcements. At one corner, beneath three gilt pawnshop bowls and a weathered wooden sign reading Jabez Wilson, stood the little business of our red-headed client. Holmes paused there, head tilted like a hawk gauging the wind. His eyes gleamed between narrowed lids as he surveyed the house, the pavement, the windows, the entire small universe of Mr. Wilson's world. Then, without a word, he strolled slowly up the street to one end, then back down to the other, his gaze flicking sharply from doorway to gutter. At last, he returned to the pawn shop. He planted a stick firmly and rapped the pavement 3 times, each thumb deliberate enough to echo up the tight row of houses. Then he stepped to the door and knocked. It opened almost instantly. A young man, clean-shaven, smart and quick-eyed, greeted us with a polite, almost too polished smile. "Good day. May I help you?" "Thank you," Holmes replied easily. "Could you tell me how to reach the Strand from here?" "Third right, fourth left," the young man answered, crisp and precise. Then he shut the door with practiced efficiency. Holmes chuckled as we walked away. "Smart fellow, that one," he murmured. "By my measure, he's the 4th cleverest man in London. Perhaps 3rd. He has a taste for audacity." "You've encountered him before?" I asked. "Oh, yes," Holmes said lightly. "Spaulding is hardly as anonymous as Mr. Wilson believes." "And I assume," I added, "you asked directions purely to look at him?" "Not him," Holmes said. "The knees of his trousers." "The knees?" I echoed in disbelief. "What I expected to find was there," he said simply. "And the tapping of your stick?" "My dear Watson," Holmes whispered, his tone sharp of purpose, "this is a time for listening, not talking. We're on hostile ground. We know the front of Coburg Square. Now we must understand the world behind it." We turned the corner and walked into a different London entirely, where the square was stagnant and stale. The road behind it was an artery of relentless motion. Wagons rattled, wheels clattered, voices barked orders, and a great tide of commerce surged in both directions. Pedestrians streamed along the pavement in an unbroken black current, every shop front shimmered with industry. Polished glass, carved stone, bold signage. It seemed impossible that these vibrant establishments shared a back wall with that tired little square. Holmes stopped at the corner, eyes darting as he counted off the buildings one by one. "Let me catalog them," he murmured. "Mortimer's Tobacconist, the little news seller, there the City and Suburban Bank, Coburg Branch, the vegetarian restaurant, and McFarland's Carriage Works. And that completes the block." He straightened, satisfied. "Well, Doctor, that concludes our business. Time for some pleasure. A sandwich, a little coffee, and in violin land, pure harmony, free from red-headed riddles." Holmes's relationship with music was something between worship and intoxication. That afternoon in St. James's Hall, he sat absolutely absorbed. His long fingers rose and fell on the air as though conducting currents only he could feel. A dreamy softness drifted over his features, utterly transforming him. The relentless, razor-sharp detective dissolved into someone contemplative, sensitive, and strangely fragile. Holmes was a man of extremes that I knew well. Days of intense quiet would give way, without warning, to sudden storms of brilliance. When the chase awakened in him, he burned like a star. When it slept, he drifted in a realm of poetry and abstraction. It was a swing from lethargy to lightning that made him so dangerous to the unsuspecting. Watching him surrender to music, eyes half closed, lips barely curved in a secret smile, I felt a faint chill. Some unlucky soul was about to be hunted, and hunted well. When the concert ended and we stepped out into the cool evening light, he stretched his arms and glanced at me. "You want to go home now, no doubt, Watson," he said. "Yes, it would be as well," I replied, though the unease in Holmes's voice was beginning to settle into my bones. He nodded briskly. "And I've business that will keep me occupied for several hours. This affair in Coburg Square is serious." I frowned. "Why serious?" Holmes gave me a long, level look. The expression he wore only when he saw the shape of something dark rising on the horizon. "A considerable crime is in motion," he said quietly. "I have every reason to believe we can stop it. But Saturday complicates things. I'll need your help tonight." "At what time?" "10 will be early enough. I'll be at Baker Street at 10. I promised." "Very good. And doctor, bring your army revolver. There may be danger." He gave a casual wave, pivoted on his heel, and vanished into the bustling crowd as though London had swallowed him whole. I have never thought myself dim-witted, but in moments like these I felt painfully aware of the differences between us. I had heard everything he had heard, seen everything he had seen, yet he strode forward with certainty, while I stumbled to confusion. The red-headed lead, the assistant with the acid-splashed forehead, the strange office lock behind a cardboard sign, all the pieces rattled in my mind without finding their place. What crime was coming? Why at night? Why armed? Holmes's warning replayed in my mind like a drumbeat as I traveled home through Kensington. Whatever game was unfolding, Vincent Spaulding, that smooth-faced, quick-eyed assistant, was no harmless shop boy. Holmes had said as much, and Holmes was rarely wrong about men. By nightfall, I had given up trying to solve the puzzle alone. I dressed, checked a revolver in my coat pocket, and left my house at a brisk 9:15. The wind cut across the park as I made for Oxford Street, then Baker Street, where two handsome cabs stood waiting like restless horses before a race. From upstairs came a chorus of voices. Inside Holmes's sitting room, I found him in animated discussion with two men. One I recognized instantly, Peter Jones of Scotland Yard, broad of build and broader still in self-importance. The other was new to me, a tall, thin man with an expression so mournful and respectable that he resembled a banker attending his own funeral. "Ah, our party is complete," said Holmes warmly. He buttoned his pea jacket and lifted a heavy hunting crop from its hook. "Watson, you know Mr. Jones of Scotland Yard, and this is Mr. Merriweather. He'll be assisting us this evening." "We're hunting in couples again, Doctor," Jones declared, puffing himself up. "Holmes here has a talent for starting a chase. All he needs is an old dog like me to finish the running." "A wild goose may be all we find," Mr. Merriweather said gloomily. He clutched his shiny hat with both hands, as though expecting it to comfort him. "You may rely upon Mr. Holmes," Jones said in a tone that implied Holmes owed him the compliment. "His methods are theoretical and occasionally fanciful, but he has the makings of detective. At times, once or twice, he has even outpaced the official force." Holmes's eyes sparkled with amusement. "If you say so, Mr. Jones," Merriweather replied with meek respect, "then I must trust your judgment, though I confess I missed my Saturday rubber. 27 years I've never missed a game." "I promise you, Mr. Merriweather," Holmes said, "that tonight you're playing for far higher stakes than cards could offer. For you, the prize is £30,000. And for you, Jones, the one man you pursued for years." Jones smacked his fist into his palm. "John Clay," he growled. "Murderer, thief, forger, and devil knows what else. Young, but top at profession, royal blood in his veins, Eton and Oxford behind him, and crime in his bones. The man is everywhere and nowhere. He'll rob a safe in Scotland on Monday and be collecting donation for an orphanage in Cornwall by Friday. I've chased him half across England and never once seen his face. Holmes smiled, the kind of smile he wore at the very beginning of a hunt. "Tonight," he said softly, "you will?" "I hope," Holmes said lightly, "that I can introduce you tonight. I've crossed paths with Mr. John Clay once or twice myself, and I agree he stands at the very top of his unsavory profession. But it's past 10, gentlemen. Time we were off. You two take the first hansom, Watson and I will follow." Holmes gave a small nod, and in a moment we were rattling off into the night. He wasn't talkative during the long drive. Instead, he leaned back, coat collar turned up, humming fragments of the violin pieces we'd heard earlier, quiet, contemplative, almost unervingly calm. London blurred around us in streaks of gaslight and shadow as the cab jostled through narrow streets, emerging eventually onto the wider stretch of Farringdon Street. "We're close now," Holmes murmured, suddenly alert. "Merryweather is a bank director, personally invested in tonight's events. Jones, I brought because he has his uses. Imbecile in his profession, of course," he added casually, "but brave as a bulldog and, once his grip, tenacious as a lobster. Ah, there they are." We had returned to the noisy commercial artery we'd visited that morning. Our cabs were dismissed, and Merryweather led us into a narrow, half-concealed passage between two buildings. A side door opened with a metallic groan, and we slipped inside. A short corridor led to a massive iron gate. Merryweather unlocked it, and we descended a winding stone staircase into the earth, passing another heavy gate, then another. The air grew colder, older, the scent of stone and dust and something metallic. Merryweather lit a lantern. Its glow spilled across a cavernous vault-lined floor to ceiling with crates and ponderous wooden boxes. Holmes lifted the lantern higher, studying the room. "You're secure from above," he observed. "And from below as well," Merryweather declared. He tapped his stick sharply against the stone floor. A hollow thud answered him. He looked startled. Holmes's head snapped around, eyes blazing. "I must insist on quiet," he said sharply. "You have already endangered the success of our operation. Please sit there on that crate and do nothing whatsoever." Offended but obedient, Merryweather perched on a box with a wounded dignity, clutching his lantern like a chastised schoolboy. Holmes, meanwhile, dropped to his knees. He swept the lantern over the floor, examining the gaps between the flagstones through his magnifying lens. He worked with swift precision. Mere seconds before he snapped upright again, slipping the glass back into his pocket. "We have at least an hour," he said calmly. "They won't move until the pawnbroker has gone to bed. But once they begin, they'll waste no time. The longer their head start, the better their chances." He glanced at me. "As you surely deduced, Watson, we are involved a city branch of one of London's principal banks. Mr. Merryweather is chairman of the directors, and presently, London's bolder criminals have significant incentive to take an interest in this cellar." Merryweather leaned toward us, lowering his voice. "It's our French gold. We received several warnings that someone might attempt to seize it." "French gold," I echoed. "Yes. We borrowed 30,000 Napoleons from the Bank of France several months ago. It's common knowledge now that the crates have never been unpacked. The very crate I'm sitting on," he gave it an uneasy pat, "contains 2,000 Napoleons stacked between sheets of lead foil. To be candid, our bullion reserve in this branch is far larger than usual. The directors are uneasy, as they should be," Holmes said. "Now, time to arrange our little strategy. I expect the matter will come to a head within the hour. Mr. Merryweather, if you would be so good as to cover that lantern with a screen." Merryweather blinked. "And sin the dark?" Holmes gave him a thin smile, the smile of the man who sees a final shape of the game. "For tonight," he said, "darkness is our greatest ally." Holmes let out a quiet sigh. "I'm afraid so. The card will have to wait, even though we are, technically, a party carry. But the preparations on the other side are already far along. A single spark of light could ruin us. His voice lowered into that calm, surgical tone he used when danger was more fact than theory. Now, positions. These men are bold, clever, desperate. Even caught off guard, they could cause serious harm if we're careless. I'll take cover behind this crate. You two hide behind those. When I flash the lantern, close in. If they fire, Watson, his voice sharpened, do not hesitate. Shoot to stop them. I didn't argue. I quietly cocked my revolver and rested it on the wooden case before me. As I crouched low, Holmes slid the lantern's cover shut. The vault fell into absolute blackness, a sensory void so complete it felt like being swallowed whole. Only the ghost of hot metal told us the lantern still burned behind that shutter, ready to explode into brilliance. The cold air pressed in from all sides. The silence felt alive, almost predatory. They have only one way out, Holmes whispered. His breath stirred the darkness. Back through the house into Coburg Square. Jones, you did what I asked. I've an inspector and 2 men posted the front door. Jones muttered. Good. Every hole plugged. Now silence and patience. Then began the long wait. To call an hour and a quarter is to insult the experience. Down in that lightless vault, hunched in the damp chill, time stretched until it felt monstrous, endless. My legs ached, my shoulders burned, but I dared not shift even an inch. My senses sharpened unbearably. I could hear every breath in the room. Jones's heavy, bulldog inhalations, Merriweather's thin, nervous sighs, and then movement, a thin glint, a spark. At first I thought it a trick of exhausted eyes, but no, a small lurid ember glowed between the stones of the floor. Then the spark widened, becoming a thin yellow slit of light. Suddenly, without a whispered warning, a section of the floor opened. A hand emerged, a pale, narrow hand, almost delicate, almost feminine, feeling blindly in the circle of lantern light below. The fingers writhed, searching, testing, then vanished again. The spark dimmed, returned, and then scrape, thud. A flagstone flipped over on its side, leaving a square opening in the vault floor. Light poured through it from a lantern below. A face rose into view, boyish, sharp, ice-cold eyes. He sized at the vault quickly, then lifted himself with easy strength until he stood fully inside. Behind him, he pulled another man, small, wiry, long-limbed, with a mop of fiery red hair and a fox-like face. All clear, the first whispered. Got the chisel? The bags? Quickly now. Great Scott. Archie, jump. I'll hang for this. He didn't get the chance. Holmes launched out of the shadows like a spring-loaded trap, seizing the intruder by the collar. The second man dove back down the hole, but Jones lunged too, grabbing a fistful of coattails that tore in his hands. A flash, a gun in the intruder's hand, but Holmes's hunting crop cracked against his wrist in an instant. The revolver clattered harmlessly onto stone. It's no use, John Clay, Holmes said, voice calm as a surgeon preparing an incision. You've no chance at all. The captured man, John Clay, straightened his coat with icy composure, as though being caught mid-burglary was merely an inconvenience. So I see, he replied coolly. I imagine my partner got away, though I noticed you captured his coattails. Impressive. There are 3 men waiting for him upstairs, Holmes answered. He'll be quite unable to leave. Clay raised an eyebrow. Well, you arranged all this rather thoroughly. I must offer you my compliments. Holmes inclined his head. And you, he replied coolly. Your scheme with the red-headed ruse was clever, fresh, almost admirable. If it weren't criminal, Jones stepped forward with his cuffs. You'll see your pal soon enough, he said. He's quicker going down holes than I am, but he's not quicker coming up them. Just stand still while I fix these derbies. Clay recoiled as if insulted. Don't touch me with those filthy hands, he snapped. You may not realize you're putting irons on a man with royal blood, and when you address me, I expect sir and please. Jones snorted. All right then. Would you please, sir, march upstairs so we can get a cab for your highness to the station. Clay gave an elegant bow, as if stepping off a ballroom floor instead of out a tunnel. Then he walked ahead of Jones without the slightest resistance, the picture of defeated arrogance. Mr. Merriweather, flushed with adrenaline and relief, turned to Holmes as we followed. Really, Mr. Holmes, I don't know how the bank can possibly thank you. This was one of the most determined robberies we've ever faced, and you stopped entirely. Holmes gave a small, satisfied smile. I'll submit a modest expense note to your directors. Tunneling criminals, late-night vigils, and violin concerts do add up, but aside from that, I consider myself well paid. A case like this doesn't come every day. And the story of the red-headed league, he tapped his temple, is one I'll keep in me for years. Hours later, long after Clay had been locked away and the adrenaline had ebbed, Holmes and I sat in Baker Street. The room was lit only by the amber glow of a single lamp, and a glass of whiskey and soda sat untouched at Holmes's elbow. "You see, Watson," he said, leaning back, the smoke from his pipe curling like thought made visible. It was obvious from the start. The league, the advertisement, the copying, the entire ridiculous charade existed for one purpose: to remove that simple pawnbroker from his shop every day. He tapped ash into the fireplace. A clumsy deception would have failed, but a scheme tied to the color of his hair, that was original, audacious, exactly Clay style. And the pay? I asked, for £1 a week? Holmes shrugged. A small investment, considering they were playing for thousands. They needed Wilson out. They needed privacy. They needed time. So one rogue rents a fake office, the other nudges Wilson toward it, and together they buy themselves a 4-hour window every day. He leaned forward, and the moment I heard the assistant work for half wages, I knew there was motive behind it. But how did you determine what the motive was? Holmes smiled. That sharp, fox-like smile that always meant he was about to peel back the world and show me the gears inside. If there had been women in the house, I'd have suspected an affair. But there weren't. The business was too small to merit such extravagant planning. So whatever they wanted was inside the house. He tapped the table with 2 fingers. Then came the photography, and the trips to the cellar. A fondness for developing plates? Hardly. The cellar was the key. He was always down there, for hours at a time. What was he doing? He raised a brow at me. Burrowing. A memory clicked into place. Your stick, tapping the pavement outside. Precisely. I needed to know the layout underground, whether the cellar extended forward or backward. It wasn't forward. He mimed the motion of knocking. Then I rang the bell. I wanted to look at him. Or at least he smirked. His knees. The knees? You saw them yourself, worn, stained, wrinkled. Knees that had spent months pushing through dirt. That told me he'd been tunneling. The only question was, toward what? He spread his hands. I walked around the block, saw the City and Suburban Bank back directly onto Wilson's premises, and the last piece fell beautifully into place. He took a long sip of his drink. When you went home, I went to Scotland Yard, and then to the bank directors. The rest you know. Holmes leaned back, exhaling a slow plume of smoke. A strange case, Watson, even by our standards, but tidy and deeply satisfying. He raised his glass. To the red-headed lead, may such absurdity never be wasted on dull minds. And how could you tell they'd make their attempt tonight? I asked, still marveling at the precision of his deductions. Holmes stretched his long legs toward the fire, speaking with the offhand ease of man, describing the weather route in the thwarting of a major heist. It was simple enough, he said. When the lead's office shut down, it told me one thing. They no longer needed Wilson, which meant the tunnel was finished. And once a tunnel exists, Watson, it cannot remain in use alone. Too much risk. It could be discovered. The bank might move as bullion, where some unlucky soul might stumble upon a loose floorboard. He laced his fingers together. Saturday night is ideal for crime. 2 days of quiet before business resumes. A long head start. A clear field. So, I said, you knew they would come tonight. Holmes nodded. For all these reasons, yes. Tonight or never. Criminal ingenuity follows its own peculiar schedule. I shook my head in admiration. You reason out beautifully. The chain was long, but every lingering's true. Holmes yawned, stretching like a cat bored by its own cleverness. It saved me from ennui, he said. That is the real service these low puzzles provide. My life, Watson, is one long attempt to escape the crushing monotony of ordinary existence. A well-constructed case is the breath of oxygen, and yet you act as if you do the world a service, I said. He gave a half-shrug, half-smile, that familiar mix of humility and arrogance uniquely his. Well, he murmured, perhaps it is of some little use. As Faber wrote to George Sand, l'homme c'est rien, l'ouvre c'est tout. The man is nothing, the work is everything. He let the words hang in the dim air of Baker Street, smoke curling above him like a soft gray halo. You just heard The Red-Headed Lead, rewritten by Raul and narrated by Rob. A case where wit triumphed over guile, and intellect cut through illusion like a blade. I'm Rob, your host, and here on Audible Archives, every mystery reminds us that reason is the bravest weapon a human can wield. If this tale stirred your curiosity, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because in the shadows of London, another adventure is already unfolding and you won't want to miss it.